The first piece that I wanted to share was largely around a leadership journey and some lessons that I've learned. And as recent as in the last couple of months, something really interesting happened in my life. The title of this discussion is largely around what I've learned from my son's initiation ceremony about failure. During the course of last year, I was starting to chat to my son because he was turning 18 in January. And I'd started to reflect on my own life, and one of the things that I never did or never went through was some sort of formal initiation. I mean, a lot of cultures around the world have got different means of having men transition from boyhood into manhood, and frankly, in our culture at the moment, I think a lot of that tradition and that drive is not there. And having read a book called Iron John, one of the most important things, one of the lessons I learned from that book was about how men need to transition from becoming a boy into a man. And there has to be a physical ceremony that goes with it. So I started to think about this and kind of figure out how we could do this. And I started to chat to my son about doing some sort of initiation ceremony. I went through the process of thinking it through, and I just said to him, I think this is probably an important way for us to do it. I mean, I'm your dad, and yes, you think I know everything, but actually I'm useless at quite a few things. And over his time, having been exposed to friends in my life and people in his life, he's also been exposed to other personalities. And I said to him, there are a lot of people around us that actually know a lot more than your dad does. I know I don't want to believe it, but it's true. But the reality is they know a lot more than I do. So I asked him, so pick 6 people, go through a process in your mind, understand who these 6 mentors that you want to hear from, and we'll create an initiation experience around it. So our plan was quite simple. On night number 1, as we went away for 2 days, that each one of these mentors would share their personal life story and share nuggets of wisdom with my son that he would then absorb and say nothing, just take it as a gift. And then on night number 2 was then for him to reflect back to each of those individuals what he heard and what is the specialness and what is the nugget of wisdom that he got from them. Now, what was interesting is, I set this entire thing up as a mechanism for my son to get wisdom from other people. What I didn't realize is how important it actually would be for everybody around the table, including myself. Every single man that was there, every single person that was there had their own story to share. They shared their own vulnerabilities and all their life lessons. But what also happened is they listened to everybody else's story. And like we were sharing diversity with my son around thought, every single person around that table, also learned something. Through this entire ceremony, my son still reflects on it now, a month later, as being one of the most incredible spiritual sowing into his life experiences. And I spent a lot of time, kind of just reflecting on what this all means. I mean, surely this is not just about an initiation story, but what are some of these core nuggets that were shared? I mean, overwhelmingly, every single person said, guess what? Life is hard. Life is going to hit you with challenges, and guess what? You are going to fail. And you've got to find a way to break through that. And they started to share some of their ideas around how this could be. And so I started to reflect on this and started to think about how could we take some of these lessons and how could I take some of these lessons and use it as a basis for learning. And then I draw some parallels. So as much as I'm a father, I'm also thinking about my leadership position within Altron Karabina. And how do we deal with some of these things and failure going forward? And out of this, I reflected on 5 key principles that I thought would be important to share. The first one is always seek counsel. Like what I shared with my son, that not your dad doesn't know everything. So maybe your individual leader or the person that is responsible for you in the organization at a leadership level also doesn't know everything. So invite other people into your life. Get the counsel from those individuals that can add the different texture and the different diversity of thought in the way that people can think and solve problems. The second core principle was largely around creating structure. So as you seek counsel from people and you come up with this idea of when you've hit a wall or have failed with something, how do you create a structure around something to get out of it? So put a plan together. Create that structure. Create a set of milestones. What is it that you're going to be doing? I mean, it's really easy to put plans in place when things are going well. It's not easy to do it when things are going badly. And you've got to think about these things and pull yourself out of yourself. Don't go into denial around the failure, and put that structure in place around the plan. Third key principle was largely around tracking and executing. Because it's one thing to put a plan together. I mean, in South Africa, we are brilliant at coming up with lots of ideas. But if you look at execution in general, that's where we struggle as a country overall. We've got one of the most beautiful constitutions in the world, and yet we lack execution. So execution and tracking and ensuring that you execute against the plan that you've put in place and celebrate those milestones in between all of that. The fourth key principle is, as you go through this failure and you're trying to get yourself out of it, is you need to cultivate hope. How do you cultivate hope in the midst of something that's not going well? It is about celebrating the small milestones. I mean, I'll give you an example in a project that we're busy with right now. I mean, the team have done some incredible work up front, but they've hit an obstacle, and actually we're in a position where the project needs to be stopped. Now, it's easy to create and make those people in the organization pariahs. But the reality is these people are sitting in the midst of that difficult situation. So what I do in that process is I end up elevating the individuals that are doing incredible work in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of irritation, in the midst of hitting a wall. And that in itself also celebrates those people that are putting their effort in and creating hope for everybody else in the organization, that we can break through and that the resilience is there. The fifth thing for me is about making sure that you continue to celebrate the vision. So as you go through difficulties and failures around different initiatives, continue to keep your vision alive. Our vision as Altron is about delivering innovation that matters. How do we continue to create that narrative about creating hope? How do we create the narrative around making a societal impact, but making a meaningful impact in customers' lives and in our employees' lives for that matter? Is continue to celebrate those stories that add to the vision and continue to spell out the vision. It is the most difficult thing to do, to cultivate and drive that vision in the midst of failure. But that is what leadership calls for. The 5 nuggets of wisdom for me that come out of learning the story of what I learned from my son's initiation ceremony was largely around, in the midst of failure, is to seek counsel. Is to get the people around you that can add and give you advice around how to break through the failure that you've come through. The second component is about building and executing on a structure. What is your plan of action? The third is about tracking and execution against that. Making sure that you deliver against the milestones and the plan that you've set, which creates the next component, which is about cultivating hope. Is as you make progress through that plan, that creates hope in the organization. But also at the same time, celebrate those individuals that are helping to pull you out as part of your leadership journey out of that difficult failure. And the fifth one is really about reinforcing the vision. Continue to tell the story about where we're going, how we're going to do it, how are we going to deliver innovation that matters, how do we continue to make a meaningful impact.